Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. My name is Colette Phipps. I'm with the Westchester County Department of Senior Programs and Services. And I also work for the Westchester Public-Private Partnership for Aging Services. Welcome to Smartphone Education for Seniors, Maximizing the Basics. We're very pleased to bring this program to you today. We have done this program, I believe, a couple of times in the past, and it's always been well received. And as a matter of fact, what we're hoping to do is to be able to do a program like this at least once every 8 weeks, because we're finding that our older adults are really enjoying it, even our younger people, because there's so much information to learn about our smartphones. I think we pretty much know that it's meant for more just to make calls and to answer calls. And so we're going to hear about that today. Like to bring greetings from Commissioner May Carpenter, and certainly from the county exec, George Latimer. And this is brought to you by Next Stage Network, one of our newest initiatives at the Department of Senior Programs. If I may, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. First, we have Andrew Crawford. Andrew is NSNA presenter. He is also a community service aide for our Department of Senior Programs and Services, and he literally is a guru on the smartphone. So we're so pleased to have Andrew with us today. And then we have a student doing his field placement with our department, the Department of Senior Programs and Services, and our student is from Fordham University's Graduate School of Social Service, and his name is Davonte Woodton. So I'm going to ask Andrew and Davonte to take it away and provide you with that information that you need. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. As Scott mentioned, my name is Andrew Crawford, and I'm just going to mute some of these other phones where I'm getting some background noise. One moment. Okay. So let me get my presentation ready here, and we'll start going through. All right, I think everybody should be able to see this now. Okay, so we've done this presentation a couple times in the past, as we mentioned, and really it's just going through the basics of smartphone usage in 2022, just for anyone who either hasn't used a smartphone before and might be interested in getting one, or for anyone who already has one but feels like they could be getting more out of it, or even just to learn about some of the other things that could be done with it, whether you have any use for them or not. So we'll get to the next slide here. So I think some of the important things to consider when using your phone is what your personal needs are going to be, just to kind of get a sense of, what do I want to do with my phone? Do I want to use it primarily to check my email? Do I want to use it to get on video calls with loved ones or coworkers or something along those lines? Because there's a million different things you can do these days from your smartphone. One of the most important things that I like to get into for the senior community is some of the health tracking features, because there's a lot of health peripherals out there these days that can be very useful. One of the best things on the market right now, if you have it can work for any smartphone actually, is you can get any kind of watch. It could be a Fitbit, it could be an Apple Watch, it could be Samsung Galaxy Watch, and you can use those to track your steps throughout the day. That way you don't need a separate pedometer. You can use it to monitor your heart rate, so that if you have target heart rates for your health that your doctor has specified, or even that you just may want to hit in your own exercise, you can find great ways to set up workouts, track that. You can track the intake of your calories if you need to be on a specific caloric intake for your diet. There's just there's just a bunch of different things. And just getting some feedback here. Another thing you could do these days for security is, there's different ways you can secure your phone with voice, face, or fingerprint recognition. And so what that means is that if you don't want to remember a passcode or a pattern to get into your phone, which is how most of them work, you could set it up where your phone will only recognize your thumbprint. It'll be the only way that you can get in, or it can use facial recognition, or it can just be activated by your voice. And these technologies are pretty reliable, I have found.
Or you can do the toll-free, I guess.
Hold on a second, I just need to mute something again.
Just mute everyone, please.
Yeah, Jen, can you mute everybody? Yeah. And the last thing to consider when using your phone is what your data consumption might look like. Some people are likely to use a lot of data and would need a plan that reflects that, whether you get an unlimited or 10 gigabyte a month. And really the easiest way to get a sense of what your data consumption would be is depending on what you're going to be doing with your phone. So if you're going to be streaming a lot of Netflix or YouTube or any kind of video on it, that's going to be a lot of data consumption. If you're going to be doing a lot of video meetings with people for multiple hours a day, that's going to use up a lot of data. However, if all you're doing is, browsing the internet, checking emails, text messages, things like that, you're not necessarily going to need a lot of data, because data is probably the biggest cost differentiator when it comes to whatever contract or plan you have with your phone provider. So, Davonte, are you in the meeting now?
I think I am, but this is still the phone. 1 second. It's
okay.
It was.
Well, just let me know if you want to take over at any point when you're ready.
Okay.
But so this section here, I'm just going to go through some of the basics when it comes to smartphones versus flip phones, because a lot of people out there are still using flip phones and don't necessarily know what it is that a smartphone, what makes it a smartphone, what differentiates it from the current phone that they have. So the first thing that everybody probably knows about a smartphone is that it has a touch screen rather than the old push button functionality. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with touch screens. They worry that they'll accidentally do things they don't want to do, or that they won't be able to get to the things they want to get to. And probably 10 years ago or so, that was fairly common, that smartphones with the touch screens, they weren't the most sensitive, they weren't most reliable. But I do find that by this point where we are with the technology, that most anyone can adapt with some practice to a touch screen. My mom, several years ago, before she passed, she had trouble with touch screen for the longest time. She was convinced that because she had poor circulation, that she would never be able to get it to work. But by around 2017 or 18, the newer screens, she really had no trouble using them. So I think for most people, it's something that, like I said, with a bit of practice, you should be able to adapt to it. Smartphones they have a lot of internet access versus flip phones, which can have very basic internet access, but they usually don't, and it's not the most reliable or useful feature of them, even if they do have it. And the advantage for flip phones there is that they're a lot less expensive because, as I mentioned before, data plans tend to be one of the biggest costs when it comes to using a smartphone. So flip phones are usually going to be significantly less amount of money per month, because all you're going to use them for is phone calls, text messages, and maybe a basic camera that comes with them as well. Smartphones will have access to all kinds of different apps that you may have heard about. So, the basic ones are, things like email, social media, like, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, if you're interested in any of those. You can use things like Google Maps or Apple Maps or Waze, any kind of navigation tool if you'd like to have a GPS. Because we're at a point now where standalone GPSs, some cars may still come with them, but purchasing your own standalone GPS is becoming kind of an outdated technology because most people will just get a mount that they can put on their dashboard in their car, and you can just attach your phone to it and it'll just sit right there. It'll speak the directions to you. It'll show you on the map. It'll do all the same things that any standalone GPS can do. So that's another advantage to a smartphone, is it saves you having to spend any extra money on GPS if you're someone who likes to have one of those. So texting is different because texting is probably for many people still easier on a flip phone because you get more of a tactile response with your fingers. You can feel the buttons, you know what you're doing all the time. It takes a little bit of getting used to for typing on a touch screen. They've gotten better in terms of using haptic feedback and selective vibrations. So you get a sense when you're hitting the screen, you do get a sense that, okay, I'm actually pushing something here, and you can identify based on that feedback when you've typed something. But that's a little bit of an adjustment, I would say, for most people, especially if you're someone who spent most of your life using a physical keyboard like for a computer, where you can always feel all the buttons.
Do it on your own, you dumbass.
So let's see. Voice recognition controls is something that a lot of smartphones have. They have different apps such as Siri or Bixby or Google Assistant, and you can use your voice to ask for a lot of help. For example, on my phone, which is a Samsung Galaxy, there's a convenient little button on the side that you can hit. It'll bring up the virtual assistant, and you can just speak to it and say, you know, I'd like to get to Google to search for something. I'd like to get to Facebook or whatever else it might be. That has, you know, its own learning curve, but again, generally speaking, on iPhones as well, even though I'm not an iPhone user, Siri appears to be pretty user friendly and not too difficult to get the voice recognition controls out of. And one of the last things that smartphones have, for anyone who's interested in different kinds of games, you're going to get a lot more mileage out of a smartphone than a flip phone. Because especially, you know, it might just be something simple like Candy Crush or Tetris or anything like that. But you could also look up different kinds of brain games, you know, things that can help keep you sharp. There's a lot of things like that that I use to help keep myself sharp, you know, different things, just kind of like exercises, you know, word puzzles. There's something like Wordle is very popular these days, Sudoku, anything like that. You can get all of those things on a smartphone. And on a flip phone, you know, you'd be very limited in terms of what you could get there. Basic things, you know, maybe Snake, something like that, but not much else. But the last two advantages of flip phones are that they're very easy to use, and the screens are less likely to take damage. So that's one thing with smartphones that people need to be aware of, is that the screens, while they're sturdier than they've ever been, they are prone to breaking. If you were to drop the phone directly onto like a sharp or jagged surface, there's a good chance that it could crack or shatter the screen. The good news there is that most cell phone providers these days will swap it out for another one. And I'm on T-Mobile. I can't speak for how Verizon AT&T works specifically, but I know that I have an insurance plan on mine, so that if my phone were to break, I could just go into any T-Mobile store and they would swap out the same model or an upgraded one, depending on how much time had passed, same day. You know, I might have to wait for an hour or so while they move all my data from one to the other, but it's generally a pretty seamless transition, and they generally don't charge any kind of money for that, as long as you've got the insurance on the phone. And just for an example of a smartphone here, this is the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. So this is one of the kind of high-end, newest ones on the market. You know, it's a nice phone. It may be a bit more than what everybody needs, but if you're someone who's interested in just getting something that will give you the most reliable, the most features, the best screen, the best speakers, the best everything, this is one of the ones that you can go for. Samsung runs on an Android platform, which is a little bit more akin to a PC in many respects. And conversely, their main competitor, this is the newest Apple iPhone 13. So again, it's I wouldn't really say that either one of these is better than the other. It really comes down to personal preference. The iPhone does everything that it says it'll do, as does the Samsung. They're both terrific phones, and I would say that when it comes to choosing one or the other, if you have no experience with either operating system, and it would just be no difference to you. The one thing to check is what kind of phones your friends and loved ones are using, because sometimes like if everyone you know has an iPhone, you'll be better off getting an iPhone because a lot of the apps and functions that Apple use, they keep kind of proprietary. They keep it in-house. They make it difficult for someone on an Android to effectively use the same uh, apps. Like you can't use things like FaceTime, and Messenger won't work. It'll work, but it won't work in quite the same way. Likewise, if everyone you know is using a Samsung or a Google phone or a OnePlus or any kind of Android phone, you'd probably be better off going with something in that family. So that's something to think about when you're considering one phone or the other, if you have no strong preferences for any other reason. Um, so here's just some of the things that you would see if you were using an Android phone, such as a Samsung or a Google phone. So you'd have the Android operating system, which you can see from this little green alien. This is the icon that represents the Android system. And these are some of the apps that you would find on there. If you were using an Android phone and you said, I want to get to Facebook, you would see that this is, Facebook looks the same in most places. If you wanted to get to the news, you would see this icon here. It's not necessarily apparent that that's what the news would look like, but this is how Google and Android choose to display their news. Gmail has recently changed their icon, so it'll come across as like a little envelope with the red M on it. That'll be the way to get into your Gmail. And some of the other features that would come with an Android phone is you have access to Google Pay. So if you're someone who doesn't like carrying credit card, or if you wanted to learn to pay for things in stores with your own phone, there's a feature called NFC that you could turn on. And basically, you can take your phone up to, like if you went into a Walgreens or CVS and you're checking out, you'd be able to just take your phone, you push it right up against or right next to the card scanner, and it would be able to pick up whatever card you associated with that phone. So like I said, for anyone who doesn't like to carry cards for, or even just have to take them out if you have them buried in a wallet or a purse somewhere and you don't want to go looking for them, it's a nice feature to have. Beyond that, you have all the usual things, like I said, news, email, of course, alarm clocks that can help you, stay on schedule for anything you need. You'd have a calendar where you can set reminders to come up to make sure that, bills get paid, that appointments aren't missed, all kinds of things like that that can help people just stay organized and up to date. I'm very reliant on my calendar on my phone these days to remind me of anything that happens. And you can customize the alerts to come in. You could say 15 minutes before, 1 hour before, a week before something is going to happen. You need that reminder. You can put that in the phone and just say, tell me about this at this point in time. If you need to get into your settings of your phone, the icon you're going to want to look for is this gear wheel here. This is what it'll look like on an Android phone. You'll just see this icon, and that'll be a way that you can get into your phone for personalization. You can get into it for, so you can customize, your background. If you want to put a picture of your dog or your grandkid or something like that on your background, you would just go in there, and it'll give you a list of options for how you could do that. You could customize your ringtones and all kinds of things that'll just make the phone a little bit more fun to use. One of the other things that I like to touch upon here is that there's a lot of great food delivery apps out there. Now, this is something that does apply to both Android and Apple, but you can, if you just want to get a quick meal, you can always go on something like Uber Eats or Grubhub or DoorDash and just have someone, go to a local restaurant and pick it up for you and bring it to you. But there's also food delivery apps for groceries, things like Instacart, where you can have someone actually go to the supermarket, pick up all your groceries. And I find that with the seniors in my life, I don't know, like my father or my mother-in-law, one of the things that's useful for them is a lot of the heavier items that maybe when they go to the store, they can't get as many vegetables or bottles of seltzer or water or something like that, that, used to not be a problem, but now like they have to think like, all right, if I have to get all this in the house, maybe I'll only get, this many potatoes, even though, if I got twice as many, I'd save money this time, or I'd have more for, more meals, things like that. So the food delivery apps can be very useful for getting basically like help with your groceries, because not every grocery store delivers on their own, and not all of them even have people who will necessarily help you get them into your car. So you do pay a little bit of a premium on top of the usual price of groceries, which we know with inflation is going up all the time. But it's still a nice option for people to have, I find, for even just select things, just to make life a little bit easier wherever possible. And last thing to touch upon here is the S Health app. So I touched briefly on this before about how there are different kinds of health. So Davonte, have you managed to get into the meeting yet?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, do you want to go up until the security? I can take over because I know you have a part on that slide.
Sure. Okay, yeah, sounds good. All right. So with Apple here, it's kind of going through a lot of the same stuff I just went through with Samsung, but I'll just show you some of these different things, some of the things that I think kind of set Apple apart from Samsung. And so one of the first things that I like to touch upon, because it applies to me, but I think a lot of people out there, is if you're any kind of hobbyist, if you like to make music, if you like to take photographs, if you like to make films, if you like to paint, digitally, or draw things, or, it could be professionally, it could be for a hobby, any of those things. Apple is really the way to go. They are, in my opinion, just superior when it comes to those kinds of features and functionality. So the one I highlighted here is Garageband, because as a musician, I own an Apple product just purely so I can record music. So for anyone out there who is into any kind of creative endeavors, I would probably guide you towards that rather than an Android. But other than that, this is an example of what Apple Health would look like if you were looking to use any of their health features. Now, I don't have personal experience with it, but my understanding is that Apple Health is largely the same as the S Health app. I think it has a lot of the same features. I don't know that it has the EKG feature. I think that may be something that only Samsung has at this point. But other than that, I think they're pretty much on an even keel. And likewise, this is how you get to Facebook or social media. This is what their email client looks like. Just a blue envelope icon. If you wanted to check the news on your phone. As I was saying, this, if you ever need to get into your settings and personalization on an iPhone or any Apple product, this is the icon you'd look for. It's similar. It's still, a gear wheel, but it looks a little bit different from the other one. So generally speaking, if you're on modern technology, if you need to get into settings, you're going to look for some sort of gear icon. The industry has kind of coalesced around that being the representation for your settings, but just wanted to give people a visual here of how it looks a little bit different. But even for those of you on the phone who are only hearing me, if you're on any of your devices and you feel like you want to get into some of the settings, just look for when you're going through your apps, look for a gear icon. It should come up somewhere, and that should give you access to some of the personalization features. And beyond that, Apple has access to most of the same apps, that Android does. They have a few proprietary ones that might be slightly different, but they have the same food delivery apps, the same social media apps. They have, a similarly functioning alarm clock, email, news. None of those are terribly different from what you'd experience on an Android phone. And then this here, what I like to cover is these days, security is becoming an increasing concern for everybody, both from the most basic users to the most advanced users, the highest levels of tech and security.
Are you ready to go?
So one of the most important things that people can do is to have a very strong password. But The challenge of having a strong password is remembering it, because, you know, if someone were to just keep all of their passwords written down physically, that would be considered as sort of a vulnerability, because theoretically someone could find any piece of paper that you've written on and access your password. So one of my best tips, I think, when it comes to coming up with a strong password is not just trying to come up with, you know, a bunch of random characters and numbers and symbols, because if you use a password pretty much only to use something that nobody who doesn't know you would ever be able to guess. That's always what I did. It sticks in your mind, something that you always remember that they did. And you just make that into a password. You add a number or an exclamation point, something simple, and it'll be something that you'll always be able to remember, but something that pretty much nobody will ever be able to guess. And I think that the more we can simplify security for people, the more secure people will typically be. Beyond that, if you're connecting to Wi-Fi in a public place, you're going to want to consider what apps you want to use on a public Wi-Fi network. Now, when you're at home, if you're connected to your own Wi-Fi, you should feel comfortable to do pretty much anything you want on your phone. But if you're at an airport or a Starbucks or a library and you're connected to their Wi-Fi, I would think twice before you start doing any online banking or checking, you know, retirement funds or anything with highly sensitive information, because when you're on a public Wi-Fi, usually it is possible for other people to access what you're doing. It's not that they can get into your phone when you're not doing anything, but they can see what data is being exchanged over that public Wi-Fi router. You have to be careful with because a lot of your data and information will be accessible theoretically to someone. It's pretty unlikely that it'll happen to any one individual, but it's just something to be aware of and to keep in mind. As I mentioned before, there's patterns, PIN codes, fingerprints, all of these things that you can use to lock your device. Personally, I use fingerprint. I find that to be the easiest one. Some people prefer to use their face, the voice. Any of those will work. But the more unique to you the method you're using is, the more secure you'll be. You know, a pin or a pattern is fairly secure, but someone could get that or guess it and get into your device. Fingerprint, you know, unless they can somehow copy your fingers, they're not going to be able to get into your device. So that's a fairly secure method. Um, Beyond that, when it comes to theft, you know, obviously anyone's device can be stolen if you're unlucky, if you're not careful. You might lose a phone, leave it on a table at a restaurant. So these are things to just be aware of, that if you have sensitive information on your phone, you know, try to keep an eye on it as best you can. Accidental spending is something that affects people who have, especially young kids. A lot of the apps out there that are kind of advertised towards kids have somewhat predatory financial things inserted into them, where they, you know, they try to take advantage of the fact that kids don't really understand the consequences of spending little or even large amounts of money to get something in a game or an app. So if you have a child or a grandchild or someone who wants to use your phone to play a game, just make sure that you're keeping an eye on what they're doing, and that you're not allowing them to authorize additional purchases, because some of these games will do it with something that's called microtransactions, where they'll ask people to spend, you know, $1, $2, you know, to go up a level in a game, or to unlock, you know, some sort of digital avatar, you know, feature, some sort of outfit or something that they can wear in the game, things like that. And it's very easy for young people to accidentally rack up quite a bill. And a lot of the time, even if you go to the company and say, hey, I didn't mean to spend this money, they'll just tell you that you're kind of out of luck, because technically, you know, you authorized it. So it's always something to watch out for if you're letting other people, especially young people, use your phone. They may inadvertently do that. And finally, just avoiding scams. These days, scams are coming through every method of that they possibly can on a smartphone. So there's apps that are out there that are designed to scam people. They try to disguise themselves as legitimate apps, and they really aren't. Lately, I've been getting lots of text messages that are scams. They will text you. They'll pretend that it's either someone who knows you, or that it's a receipt for a bill you've paid. and they'll put like these strange little links in it. So my advice is when you get text messages from people you don't know, don't open any random links that come via text message. You know, if it's something important from someone you actually know, you should be able to call them or text them back and verify that it's a real thing. But most companies will not just out of the blue send you random links to click on. That's one of the ways that they try to trick people. Likewise, by email, there's plenty of scams that come in. I mean, there's old ones, you know, such as, you know, a foreign prince who says to you that, you know, you've inherited their money or that they trust you to take care of their money, or you've won the lottery in some country you've never been to. Things like that, of course, have been around for, you know, I mean, even going back to the pre-email days. But there's other kinds of scams that, similar to the text messages, they will try to, you know, they'll try to trick you into clicking on something that you shouldn't, or to giving up information that you shouldn't. So the main thing to keep in mind is that anybody who actually needs any sensitive information for you will have ways of verifying that they're legitimate, that they should have access to your information beyond just sending out, you know, kind of cold emails, random links, things like that. That's how you know it's suspicious. If it doesn't feel right, if you have any instinct that says to you this isn't right, don't follow through on it, because anything legitimate that you need to do, you'll be able to take care of later. Anyone who tries to rush you, or, you know, say, oh, this is of, you know, the most urgent, you know, matter, like have to take care of this immediately, there's a good chance that that's a scam. So try not to let them emotionally manipulate you into giving up any information you don't want to. And finally, by phone, I mean, I think we all get inundated with spam calls these days about our car's extended warranty, or about, you know, how we've done a trip to the Caribbean, or whatever it might be. So again, use basic, you know, common sense wherever you can. And for me, I try to avoid answering phone calls that come from area codes that I'm not familiar with, and generally from phone numbers I'm not familiar with. I don't get a lot of spam that ever comes from a 914 area code, but I get a lot that come from, you know, 212 or 917 or 718, and certainly from all over the country and the world. I think you use a little bit of discretion. If it looks like a local phone number, you can probably feel safe to pick it up. Outside of that, let them leave a voicemail, call them back. It's not worth letting the scammers know that you will pick up their calls, because that will incentivize them to call you 10 times as often. That's one of the things they do. If you don't pick up, you'll be less likely to receive more calls. But if you do pick up, even if you hang up right away, they'll know that it's a real phone number. They'll know that you're there, and that they might be able to trick you. So generally speaking, try not to answer unknown phone calls. All right, Davonte, did you want to take over from here?
Thank you, Andrew. Feel free to jump in if I miss anything, or if you want to add anything. So on the next slide, we'll be talking about Wi-Fi. I know Andrew talked about Wi-Fi a little bit in the previous slides. So when you're connecting to Wi-Fi, it's sort of like free internet. If you have that connection set up, it's something that you can pay for, but it's also something that places have for free. It's like if you're in a bookstore, in a coffee shop, you'll be able to have access to their wireless internet, and that will not be part of your data plan. So while you're using their internet, or the internet you have set up in your house, you'll be using it separately from your phone internet. And then in regards to your plan, some people use this as a way to save money, because you don't need to have an internet plan. If you have Wi-Fi at home, you'll have full access to your internet, as long as you're at home or somewhere with Wi-Fi. So I know for like my grandfather example, he doesn't pay for internet on his phone. He has a Wi-Fi hotspot in his house, and he's okay with only using the internet while he's home in his apartment. So that's a way that he can save money on his phone plan.
Interesting. Saving money on a Wi-Fi. Well, I don't want to
Please,
talk.
please mute yourself if at all possible, please.
You can answer any questions at the end if there's time,
Yeah.
if we finish in time. And I think we can move on, Andrew, to battery life.
Okay.
So phone battery life, this is how long your phone is going to stay on before you have to charge it again. And this can be affected by different things, such as how many apps you're using at the same time, even how bright your screen is. I know most phones, I think Samsung's as well, have automatic brightness, which will change the brightness for you automatically depending if you're inside or if you're outside, if it's dark out. So that won't be something you have to worry about. Most phones give you a warning when you're at 20%. At that point, I would tell people probably to start charging your phone. Any point before that, you don't have to worry about it. You do have power saver mode on most phones, which will extend the time you have before you need to charge it again. So that's really good. Like if you're out shopping and your phone is getting low on battery, you can just put on power saver mode and it should get you through what you need to get through until you can get home and charge your phone. There are things like external batteries, which can charge your phone, such like at a little battery pack. You can buy them at like Walmart, and that gives your phone like an extra charge if you're on the go. Your life of your battery will be affected by how old your phone is. So the older the phone, the more often you'll have to charge it. And then moving on to personalization. This is something that is very individual to your phone, such as text size. So for the text size, that'll be the size of the wording on anything on your phone. So when you're searching through the internet, when you're sending a text message, you can actually increase or decrease the font size to your liking. So for people who might need reading glasses, you can actually just blow up that font size and your whole phone can be zoomed in, as well as the screen zoom. Anything in your background, you can sort of edit, such as my wallpaper on my phone is my little brother. You might want to put, you know, a grandson or a granddaughter on your background so that you can see them every time you open your phone. You can have customized ringtones. If there's a song you like, when someone calls you, that song will play. Widgets are a little different. They're like tools that you have on your phone, such as a flashlight. You'll be able to swipe up and click a flashlight if you ever need it. But again, those things are very individual to your own phone, and you can set that up however you like. And I think next we have the Google Play Store. So Andrew talked about earlier about different apps that you can get. If you have a Samsung or a type of Google phone, in order to download those apps, you'll use the Google Play Store. So you'll go in the Play Store app if you want to download Instacart, some games, if you want to download messaging apps or social media such as Facebook, you'll go here. This will be your go-to for everything that you want to download on your phone. And then I think it's a little out of order, but it'll be the same for Apple. The App Store is just called the Apple Store for iPhones, and that's the same thing as the Google Play Store.
Shoot.
And we can go back to the previous slide, Andrew.
Mhm.
All right. And if you look on top, that's your search bar. Anything that you want to download, you'll have to search in the search bar. So if you're looking to download Facebook, you'll type in Facebook, and the Facebook app will come up. And then you can actually just click to download. You might have to put in a password. Andrew talked about passwords before. That's whatever customized password you pick to have access to your phone. You'll enter that and the app will download. Below the search bar, it gives you the apps and their ratings. So those ratings, I think they're usually out of 5 stars, if I'm correct, Andrew.
Yes.
So you can see what people have rated those apps. You know, more than likely you'll want to download an app that has more stars. If it has 1 or 2 stars, the app probably isn't that great. And then you have the operation icons, which are sort of like the display of the app. So Facebook looks like it's a blue icon with an F on it. And every app is different. It'll have its own icon, and that's what it'll show on your phone when you download that app. And then going to rating info. On rating info, it's the same thing. Most apps are rated out of 5 stars. You can actually go in and read people's reviews. So if there's a game that looks interesting to you, you can actually go into the reviews and you can see what people are saying about those games. And if it looks like it's something that you're interested in, you would just go ahead and download it. And then we have video conferencing and calls. So for video conferencing, it's sort of what we're doing now on Webex. There are different things that you can use to talk on a video chat. There's FaceTime, there's Hangout, which is Google. So if you have a Samsung phone, you might be using Hangout more than someone with an iPhone. You have Zoom, which you can use on any computer or any phone. There are Zoom apps. Facebook Live, which is what you would use if you're using Facebook Messenger to video chat with somebody. We have Cisco Webex, which we are on now, GoToMeeting, Microsoft, which you would mostly use if you're using a PC phone or a laptop, Google Meet, and then Blue Jeans. For other video conferencing, for example, if you're going to a doctor, they might send you a link. Some doctors may use WebEx, some may have their own platform that's not listed here, but they would give you that link and you would be able to access that telehealth on your phone as long as you have a camera. And then I think the next slide, I'm going to let Andrew take over so he can explain the Jitterbug phone a little further.
Sure. So the Jitterbug is a phone that's been around for a long time, even before smartphones, but it's basically something that's designed for seniors specifically. It's generally pretty affordable. It's only $150, which by smartphone standards is very cheap. But it is actually a pretty decent phone. As you can see from the image here, a lot of the icons are bigger with bigger text. They're simplified. There's not as much kind of graphics involved. They just kind of keep it simple, so you can get between the things you need to get to, and not worry about things that be distracting or confusing or just unnecessary. One advantage as well is that they have no contract. So if you get a Jitterbug, you're not tied into it for year after year after year. You could just get it, try it out, and if it doesn't work for you, you could probably return it and try a different one. They do have a lot of health and also safety services. So things like Life Alert and other kinds of health peripherals like that can be tied into a Jitterbug more easily than they can with some other smartphones. Although I believe these days you could probably use those devices with any smartphone. But Jitterbug is, as well as their support people are kind of very knowledgeable on those kinds of things. So if you're someone who uses any of those things, you might be inclined to take a look at Jitterbug and see how they are. The biggest cons from what I've read is just that the interface is a little bit slow. If you use a Samsung or an iPhone, the screen and the way the screen moves with your fingers, everything is snappy. It responds almost instantaneously. With the Jitterbug, it's a little bit slower, so you might scroll and have to wait, I don't know, half a second, maybe less. It's not like it's a massive delay in the interface, but it's a little bit less impressive hardware, which is reflected in the lower price. So I would say that, if you're really just, especially if you're not familiar with smartphones, if you're a senior and if you just want to do a lot of the basics, Jitterbug is a really solid choice, and it's not something a lot of people know about. I mean, they used to run ads for the old Jitterbugs years and years ago. I don't know if they still do because I don't watch much regular TV anymore, but in my experience, not a lot of people have heard of Jitterbug, but they run a pretty good service. So I would certainly, if you're in the market for a smartphone, at least consider it and see if it's got anything that you might need. And some of the last things to just consider is, how much data should your plan have? So I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but some of the plans, they do still specify, depending on which provider you're with, how many minutes you have, how many text messages you have. A lot of them offer unlimited calls and texts, but some don't. So it's important to consider, like if you're going to spend a lot of time on the phone, make sure you have unlimited or just a lot of minutes so you won't get any overage charges. Same thing with text messages. I think they all offer unlimited these days, but just make sure that that's the case when you're getting your phone, when you're seeing what the service is. And when it comes to data, if you're going to be watching a lot of videos, streaming a lot of videos, or streaming a lot of music, even like anything that just eat up your data. So make sure you know how much you have, and you can usually ask someone to show you how to check your data. Most of these phones have a way of tracking how much data you've used within your billing period, so you can always get an idea. So if you're getting about halfway or 3/4 of your billing period, you can say, okay, I've watched a lot of Netflix on 5G this month, so maybe I'll slow down until the next billing period so I don't create an overage and have to pay for something needlessly. But of course, as I mentioned before, if you have Wi-Fi, that's really the place to do those things, because Wi-Fi, you're using Wi-Fi, you're not using your data. So that can be a great cost saver, is to not have a data plan and just rely on Wi-Fi for things other than calls and texts. And so that wraps up the presentation for myself and Davonte. So if anyone has any questions. Okay, we're going to stop the recording here, but in the few minutes that we have left, and since we started a little bit late, we can go, I think, a couple minutes beyond the 12 o'clock end time, just to see if anyone has any questions about their smartphones, or if you need any advice on getting one, or honestly, any questions you might have that's relevant to this.